welcome to a special Zelda Month episode of the Switch Clicks podcast. Zelda Month has returned. During the entire month of November, we're celebrating the Legend of Zelda series with 5 special podcast episodes featuring interviews with some of the greatest online creators.
Additionally, we will be showcasing 4 play-it-by-tier episodes reviewing various Zelda games, and we will be bringing back Triforce trivia later this month. Check out the episode description for more information.
My name is Dakota, and tonight I'm joined by our Zelda expert, Nathan.
Hello.
And our special guest tonight is MelonSpeedRuns, a video game programmer and software engineer known for modding Zelda games as well as modding other Nintendo titles. Welcome to the show.
Hey, what's up?
So, if I missed anything in that opening, what do you do specifically? Well, how would you describe what you do?
I consider myself a modder. So what I do is I take games that Nintendo releases, like Mario Odyssey, Breath of the Wild, and basically any game, and I just modify them to add content, fix bugs, or just make sure to
make them prettier.
Yeah, exactly.
Is there any secret to get those games, or do you just kind of download them?
No, so
how does that work?
I mean, legally speaking, you have to get your games from your own source. You cannot download them. So what I personally do myself is that I buy the game either on the eShop or as a cartridge.
Yeah.
And then using a modded console, so either a modded Wii U or a modded Switch, I then extract this cartridge or this download into a ROM. And said ROM, I simply can run on my PC using emulators, and I can modify the files of.
So you get basically the raw data, essentially.
Yeah, so it's kind of like, think of it like a disk, right? Like on the surface, a disk is just like, it's a piece of plastic sometimes, and then once you go inside the files, then you can see all the data and you can mess with the files. And that's essentially what modding is. It's just on a cartridge instead.
Yeah, it's always been weird to me that if you were to put, maybe there's a question you can actually answer, if you were to put like an Xbox game into a PC, would you be able to get the files straight from the disc?
No, so
from a disc?
No, so it's the same deal as the Wii U discs. So the Wii U discs are made specifically for the Wii U disk drive, which means that if you were to put a Wii U disc on your PC, the PC disk drive wouldn't be incapable of reading the disk because it's not the same file structure or not even the same type of disk as a normal PC CD-ROM would be.
Interesting. Well, maybe the first major question would be, what gave you the interest to create mods in the first place?
Yeah, so when I started high school, I basically really wanted to get into game programming with my life. Like that, I knew from the get-go that that's what I wanted to do with my life. And then from there, I kind of in my free time, I messed with Unity, started making some bad games, but still they were just small little things for me to have fun in. And I also messed with RPG Maker, so I kind of had a good base of how to make games, but I couldn't quite pull off making the entire game by myself, So this is where modding comes into place, where essentially the game is already made, right? You just have to modify what you want to do in the game, what you want to change, and then that's it. There's no coding involved. There's no modifying a lot of data. You just modify what you want, and then it just shows up in the game. So this was really appealing to me because when I didn't know how to continue with my Unity work, I found out you could modify Mario 64 and you could add levels to the game with specific tools. And then from there, I just decided to do that because the game was already made, the physics were there, all the graphics was already there. I just needed to make my little platforms and ground, and Mario could jump on them, and I could add a star at this position. Essentially, that's how I basically became a modder, just by wanting to mess up with a game.
And I'm assuming that the older the game is, the more tools the internet has made to modify a game?
It depends on the game. If you're talking to me about a very popular old game like I said, Mario 64, that probably has 1,000 tools by now. So yeah, that's gonna be like a game that is very accessible. That has a bunch of documentation and tools. But if you go and tell me, hey, I want to mod Excitebike 64, like people are gonna be like, what? There was an Excitebike on N64, and there might not be tools for the game. So in such a case, you either have to create the tools yourself and figure out how the game works, which could take years, or you just give up.
Yeah, and I'm assuming there are multiple communities online that of modders that could probably help each other if they wanted to like target a game.
Right. Well, it's on like modding is basically is very specific to the point where, let's say I'm a Zelda modder, right?
Yeah.
I could be interested in, like I said, Excitebike. That's fine, but unless I find other people that also want to mod that game, I don't think I could get very far alone unless I knew a lot about decompiling games.
Did you have to go to any post-secondary to learn your skills, or do you just learn it all from having a hobby?
Yep, all from having a hobby. Like I said, the Unity work I did in RPG Maker, that was pretty much all to my knowledge. That was all learned online.
That's very nice.
Dang.
That's pretty crazy. Like even I'm personally I'm very very low level at this. There is so much I still have to learn, but hearing this from you kind of gives me a little bit more motivation to potentially dive into this sort of area.
Definitely start with Mario 64 because it's a game everybody knows, and there's like a visual editor, so you can make a
Yeah.
map and then you can decide, oh, I want to place a star there, and I want a red coin to be under this block. Like it's very visual, kind of like Mario Maker in a way, but more advanced and in
I
3D.
Speaking of Mario Maker, what do you think of a 3D Mario Maker?
Oh yeah. So here's what I was hoping. When Mario Maker 2 was unveiled, and this controversy where you had the 3D World game, right?
Oh
But then you had the
yeah.
empty slot at the bottom, like that
Mhm.
didn't have any game, and people thought that they would add another game in there, maybe Mario Odyssey, and that would be a 3D mode. But that never came that never came to fruition. The slot is still empty to this day, which I
Yeah.
find is really funny. But I was hoping it would be like kind of Mario Odyssey, but you could modify the depth as well, so you could have multiple like layers of
Mm.
a 2D level and make a 3D level with that. That I think it could be the best way to do a 3D Mario Maker. Just have a 2D
Cool.
level, but that you can modify the different layers of the 2D level to make a 3D map.
Yeah, a little bit
But
similar to like the underground areas in 3D World, where it's a little bit 2D, but there was some depth to
Exactly.
it. Yeah, interesting.
specifically looking towards Breath of the Wild, I guess what brought you to mod that game?
Can I be honest? It was the Shrek Hinox mod. um, there's a mod that came out like within the first month of the game's release, which replaced Hinoxes with Shrek.
Yeah,
And back
Oh my
then
gosh,
there
I
was like the
remember
huge
that.
Shrek meme wave that was when that was going on, and basically I was still playing the game back then, but then I saw
Mhm.
like this mod and I was like, wow, okay, so you can legit just add any character, I guess, in the game, and that that really interested me. So I rushed the game to the point where I just did the 4 Divine Beasts, beat Ganon, and that was my playthrough of the game. I didn't do any shrine, I didn't do any side quests. So yeah, I rushed the game, and then I dumped my own copy, and I started fiddling with the files and found out, oh well, the game is really based around the data, which means you don't really have to modify. You don't have to modify the code of the game at all. You just have to imagine imagine the game's weapons as like a zip file, and
Yeah,
every file inside that zip file is a weapon. You can just duplicate a file and
that,
change it to whatever you want to create a new
that's
weapon.
it. That's it. You just
That's essentially it. It's a bit more complex, obviously, but it's
Oh.
essentially how the game is made. Is that the game will just look at those files and be like, okay, that's the list of weapons. Oh, there's a new one. Well, I'm gonna load that in instead. And yeah, so it was extremely easy to create weapons, and that made me really want to mod the game and add more content to it because it was just so easy.
I take it like if you were to work on some massive modding projects, this would be like substantially easier than like most other games in that sense.
Yes. There's a big modding project right now called Second Wind, which I
I need to
help a
catch.
little around it here and there, but it basically adds towns to the games, and each town has its own NPCs and quests. Like they can create custom quests just by modifying what is essentially JSON files. Yeah, they can create weapons, you can create new crafting mechanics. Like the game is really centered about around those like zip files, I guess, and you can just modify those however you want, which is honestly kind of surprising. It was surprising at first because I thought it was going to be like Mario 64, where everything is like compressed, everything is like mixed up together and all over the place. But no, it's very structured, and I think it was the first game that really did that this much.
Really? Like no other Nintendo game is this well organized or easy to work with?
I know Mario Maker is easy to modify graphically wise, like you can modify the sprites and the 3D models. And Mario Maker 2 is even easier, but maybe Splatoon as well. But those games are more because of their nature, their gameplay nature.
Yeah.
Like Splatoon is a more linear kind of game when we talk about the story mode. So if you were to want to create a custom level, you'd have to modify level 1 and then change the platforms, add objects, and you'd have to create a map editor, right?
Yeah.
To modify the levels. Or you could modify the Inkling models, and that's fine enough. Breath of the Wild, I feel, is more of an empty slate kind of game where it's open world, first of all,
Yeah.
and it doesn't have too many mechanics that distract from the core gameplay, which means that let's say you want to add a weapon, right? Well, you can just say, oh, well, drop this new weapon I've created in this mountain, like at this specific spot, and then let the player find it. And there we go. Now the player can just download that mod, and they have a new weapon to look forward
Oh my
to, and
gosh.
they can just use it. It's like that. But in the Splatoon, let's say you wanted to create a new weapon, you'd have to include that in the story mode, and like it will require coding because the game, how the game is made, every weapon has its own unique mechanics, and that's usually in code in game modding. You cannot modify the code of the game. You're limited to the files that are on the disk.
I see. So, in a sense, basically, like Breath of the Wild, it kind of does surprise me to hear about that because Breath of the Wild is one of those games that Nintendo spent a lot more time on, and obviously with the delays that were added on, you'd expect them to have a bunch of other stuff left over. But I guess like, what was like your initial thoughts when you first got into Breath of the Wild modding? If you haven't mentioned that yet.
Well, my first thought was like, again, I was surprised by the amount of data, like just the zip file system I was talking about. I was surprised by that because um, like I said, like other Nintendo games have done it this way, but not to this extent where everything is like modifiable in an easy way.
Mm-hmm.
And it also made me realize that this could open the gates a lot more for like future Nintendo games that are open world, because if
Oh,
they're coded this way as well, maybe not like Tears of the Kingdom level, but if it's another open world like Mario Odyssey, which it is, by the way, Mario Odyssey is about the same way as Breath of the Wild, and because of it, you can add levels, you can add new. You cannot really add objects like enemies, but you can add like new levels and new kingdoms to the game pretty easily.
ooh, that sounds promising.
And every kingdom can have its own cutscenes with stars. I mean, sorry, moons that appear whenever you do an action, and that's
Mhm.
all done again throughout those zip files that you can modify.
That must like save so much time for modding. I'd assume.
Yeah, like it also helps that Nintendo usually reuses their file formats over multiple games. So the model format for Nintendo games has been the same since Splatoon 1, I think. Which means that once
Wow.
somebody figured out how to edit Splatoon 1 models, that got transferred over to Breath of the Wild, Mario Odyssey, like everything else. And it's the same tool to modify models, and it has been since Splatoon's released almost.
Ooh.
And with all the talk about like modifying games, like how heavy you guys modify some of the games, are you ever worried about what I guess Nintendo fans call them? They call them Nintendo ninjas or just the lawyers.
Yeah.
And what do you have to do to like avoid the copyright minefield? Other than I guess usually the main rule is don't sell it, right?
Yeah. It's essentially that. Don't sell it. Don't make a YouTube video about it. Nintendo
Hmm.
has the right to still shut down your YouTube channel and videos if you make modding videos.
Interesting.
So if you do release a mod, do it on a website that doesn't require a trailer or a YouTube video, like Game Banana. Game Banana is the most popular modding website in the world, and there's like I think like 10,000 mods, like for like no, there's like a million mods. I think like there's a lot of mods, and um, basically you go to that site, you sign up, and you can just upload your mods for the game. So and because you're only uploading the modified files, you're not uploading obviously the whole 14 gigabytes game. It makes it legal for you to share those files. And by that nature, Nintendo cannot do anything about it since you're not selling it and this is fair use.
Hmm. What do you think about fan games that are shut down by Nintendo?
Those I can understand why they're being shut down. It's because they're different from mods where mods only include specific files from the games and those files are modified.
Mhm.
Fan games are whole games based around an IP by Nintendo, and those fan games will have sprites, 3D models, animations ripped from other Nintendo games and put and combined together to make another game. And this is where I feel like Nintendo doesn't like it. It's because you're doing a game, and Nintendo's a game company, right?
Yeah.
And
Yep.
they don't like that because you're like you're making use of their IP with the same context that they do. While modding is more, you're not releasing a game, right? You're just modifying, you're just
You're just throwing,
releasing text
adding
files.
stuff.
And with your experience in like modding and I guess in maybe in the far future, if you were to create like a game on your own or maybe with a team of modders, not modding a certain game, just maybe just a game from scratch, what would you want it to play like as the producer or director?
Oh, I've had an idea of a game I wanted to make a while ago, and I still want to make it. Have you guys played Sonic Adventure either on the GameCube, on the PC, or basically just Sonic Adventure 1?
Yes.
Played a tiny bit of one.
I played
Okay,
through the entire game.
Oh
okay.
my.
Have you played Amy's Story?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
am not
Uh,
familiar with it.
okay, so essentially Amy has a big hammer, and she normally runs really slowly. Like she's not
Yeah.
like Sonic where she runs fast. She runs really slow.
Very painful.
And when you start running forward for like a couple seconds, she starts putting her hammer on her side. And if you decide to attack during that time when you're going a little bit fast, she actually smashes her hammer down on the ground, and it does a huge jump in the air. And
Oh, I
that's how
remember
she's
that
able
mechanic.
to gain height. And I think that's something that even Mario could benefit from. Just
Yeah, something
if you reach a certain speed and you press a button, you gain a high jump.
rather than just having to sprint and jump and like.
Exactly. So that's something I was thinking, but with a bunny. So I was thinking, what if you had a 3D platformer similar to Mario 64, and the main mechanic was using the bunny's ears to not only attack, but also bounce off the ground to
Oh,
reach higher places. And you could also do the same thing on walls to do wall jumps, but you have to time them.
and
So
I
yeah,
guess
that
I guess
was
Wow, that's actually a really like it sounds like it's gonna be a really insane idea. Um, would you like I guess with those mechanics, would you design the levels like with verticality in mind, like very high
Um,
platforms to reach and whatnot?
yes, yes, definitely. I would like to see something like Mario 64, but maybe a little bit more vertical in terms of
Hmm.
sections. If you look at Mario 64 has a lot of flat ground, especially
Yeah,
like Bob-omb Battlefield, where like half the map is just flat grass.
yeah.
So I'm thinking more platforms, more pillars to jump on at some points, and it could make for a really cool, just just a collectathon where you just run around, collect items, and get stars or whatever, and that's the game I'd like to make.
Oh, I take it it might have a little it might have some degree of difficulty that you wouldn't find in a Mario game.
Yeah, I guess so. I still want to make it maybe like not as hard as, let's say, Mario 64. I kind of want to make it easier than that.
Okay,
I'm a very casual player most of the
I see.
time. So I know my username has speedruns in it, but beside doing glitches in games, sometimes I don't really do speedruns. And so I usually play games like Animal Crossing and like Breath of the Wild, but
Yeah.
even in Breath of the Wild, just run around and do stuff instead of actually trying to challenge myself.
Hmm.
So if I were to make the game, I would may make it a bit easier than Mario 64 for sure, just so it's a good ride all along.
Hmm.
Just for a fun game, not a what would you call that? Like a trendy game, almost like Jump King and
Oh yeah, no,
Pogo
no, no.
Jump.
I
Oh
don't like
gosh.
those games.
Good.
I know those games have their audience, but it's not me.
That's good to hear. Most
Yeah.
most people just want their game to get super popular and then die off within a month.
Yeah.
No, so
Want something different.
that's a friend of mine. His name is Strawbunny. He's also a streamer and a huge friend, and I decided to basically do the same thing, mod his character in the game. And as you can see, I was able to modify the Master Sword to be the carrot.
Yeah.
Oh,
Did you have to modify any of like the armor to match the body size, or did you match the model to where the armor would normally be? How would that work?
Uh, right. So normally you'd have to modify the armor to match the new body shape, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the bunny's like body shape was so similar to Link that I didn't even have to modify most of the armors because it already fit perfectly. I could have gone and edited again all the armors to fit, but I decided not to because it would have taken me like weeks and weeks of full-time work.
Mm.
So I decided to just modify like 2 or 3 armors so they fit, but that was the end of it.
Yeah, there's honestly probably too many armors to
There's like
modify.
160, I think, in the game.
Oh yeah,
So
that's
yeah,
a lot.
no.
For any audio listeners, we are looking at pretty much a pink bunny replacing the Link model from Breath of the Wild. If you want, you can go to our YouTube channel and check out a photo. I'll have it on screen. For kind of the future, what kind of mods are you looking to create or bring over to Tears of the Kingdom? Although we don't have much information on that game, but I'm sure you have some ideas.
I'm like 99% sure the game is going to have the same. Well, I am 100% sure it's the same engine as Breath of the Wild, and
yeah.
I'm
Why wouldn't it
99% sure it's going to be the same data structure as Breath of the Wild, which means same zip format, maybe even better. And I'm honestly guessing most of the mods that were made for Breath of the Wild are going to be able to be ported easily to the new game.
Yeah, I would honestly hope so.
be? Yeah.
Yeah,
Me
I believe that. Like from experience, I could tell you if that's not the case, I'm going to be very surprised.
Yeah, that's what the 6-month delay was for.
Oh
Completely
yeah.
re-engineering it.
too.
Oh no.
Safeguard against mods.
Oh no. But I mean, here's the thing. Nintendo did add some mod security, I guess, in Breath of the Wild. Is that in the game's files there's a table that has a list of every file in the game, and it also has a file size next to it. So for every file in the game, it has a value of the file size, and if the file size doesn't match the actual file, the game crashes.
That's an interesting way of stopping it. How would you get around that? Do you just like perfect it, or
You just modify the table and say, "Oh, this file is now this size."
That's it.
That's
Well,
it.
I guess
I
that.
mean,
I guess.
yeah.
I guess
Yeah.
that.
There's that, and there's also on the title screen where it says copyright Nintendo at the bottom.
Okay.
That is actually written in code, not in the files as it should be. So if you were to want to modify this specific copyright Nintendo, you'd have to modify the code of the game just to modify that.
Which is probably a good thing, so they have the copyright on their work.
Yeah. I mean,
It's-
like, if anybody would
Writing
replace
code.
Nintendo's name, that'd be bad looking for them anyway.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe just move over to you specifically, less of modding. But what served as your inspiration for either your username or your profile pictures?
All right. So, well, first of all, the username, MelonSpeedRuns. I'll be honest. I was speedrunning a few years ago under a different username, and then I wanted to change my username, and I basically told myself, I do speedruns, and I need a dumb name. So I thought of the name of a fruit, and was like, what sounds good? Potato, cantaloupe, no, melon, and yeah,
Melon.
that was it. There was no thought process beside that.
Well,
And
it
that's
is actually. It's a very creative one.
It's
Thank
a pretty
you.
good name over different languages too, because melon is one of those words that you can understand throughout many languages.
I did not know that back then, but now I know.
Oh, well, there you go.
Yeah, cool. And for the profile pictures, right now on Discord, it's like a Mythopia character of a frog. That's
Yeah.
actually I would like to say just my original character. So it's a frog
Oh.
that represents me, but it's not like actually me. It's just like, think of it like a stand in JoJo, I guess. Like, or like a persona. Like, it's not
Yeah.
actually me, but you know,
Okay,
kind of.
wait. Have you seen JoJo? Are you a
No,
okay?
Oh, okay.
I was about to say, are you a
did I say
low-key
something
weeb?
bad?
No, you're good.
Okay. Okay.
I don't.
So yeah, it's kind of like that, and I a friend of mine basically approached me with like they just drew art of a frog with watermelon colors, and they were like, "Hey, that's you," and I took that joke way too seriously, and yeah, that's me.
Oh my gosh. Weren't there a couple of times that you also had like watermelon profile pictures too?
Right. So that was before the frog. I was just a watermelon piece with eyeballs, like googly eyes. That was before the frog.
I mean, yeah. I mean, if you name yourself Melon, I guess the branding matches.
Yeah.
We're gonna be asking every guest this, but pretty much what got you into the Zelda series specifically? Even
Can
before
I?
modding, I assume.
Well, I guess I can just start with what got me into gaming because that's pretty much it. When I was
Yeah.
5 years old, my parents bought me a GameCube, and they bought me Luigi's Mansion with it.
Yeah.
And as a 5-year-old, Mario was on, like, Luigi's on the box, like just cute ghosts. It should be fine, right? I was petrified by the ghosts, and I didn't want to sleep at night. I was scared, and I cried a lot because I didn't like the game. So my parents exchanged it to Wind Waker,
Oh,
and
lucky you.
honestly, like, it's the game that shaped me as who I am today, and it was the best choice my parents ever made. So yeah, Wind Waker. It's that cute cartoony game that has a kind of like light-hearted story, but can get deep at times. And honestly, just like, I love the gameplay, I love the graphics. Like people still trash on the graphics today, but no, they're good.
Yeah,
And no, yeah, it's really the game that made me who I am today. And even today, when I see a game with cell shading, I just prefer that over like any realism game because
Honestly, I have to
Let's
agree with
be
you there.
honest. Like, there's too many realistic games out there.
Yeah, like I have to agree with you there. Like it's just with cell shading, you can just see things so much better, so much
Oh
easier.
yeah, so many more
Everything's
colors than
so much
gray
more.
and brown.
Everything's so much more expressive. There's like a lot more personality to it.
Since that's your like catalyst game, have you ever gone back and like added things to it? I assume you have.
Um, Surprisingly not, because there's one reason
Oh,
for that is that the game, as much as it is loved, it is one of those games that had a controversy behind it, being the graphics. And
Hmm.
because of that, there's not that many tools behind the game. Like,
oh, I see.
so it's really hard to modify. I did do a mod for Link to 7, which is a streamer on
Hmm.
Twitch. I did a mod for him that replaced every single enemy to be invisible.
Oh,
So
oh,
it was cool to make, but like, it was just deleting the 3D models of the enemies. It wasn't anything like good. But there's a tool going on right now that allows you to create custom maps. But then
Ooh.
again, due to the nature of the game, if you wanted to make a map that adds into the game, you need to add islands. And because of how
Hmm.
the game is coded, you cannot add islands without crashing the game.
oh yeah, because
So
every
Interesting.
segment has an island basically.
yeah, so you need to expand that, and that would require redoing the map structure of the game, doing the mini map, redoing the charts. Like,
Hmm.
you'd have to redo pretty much the whole game just to add some more islands.
That
Yeah,
sounds like a nightmare.
it's not
Yeah.
nearly as clear cut as the future Breath of the Wild, I guess.
Yeah. Which is why I
Interesting.
like Breath of the Wild. Like I said, it's an empty slate, and it's like you can expand upon it without modifying the whole game.
I guess you can technically say that it's a Breath of the Wild.
Oh yeah,
Haha.
it's wild. It's so wild.
And kind of the final question we're also going to ask every guest this month is in real life, what kind of power would you have? Power, courage, or wisdom?
Courage.
Courage.
Courage for sure.
Courage.
I'm a very shy person to the point where in my life I usually don't go in, when I have the opportunity to do something. Like,
Mhm.
let's say my friends are like, they go to a bouncy castle, right? Like, that's a story. When I was a kid, my friends would just go in the bouncy castle, but I was scared of it, so I didn't go. I was just standing there looking, and that's me. That's just who I am. But if I had the Triforce of courage, I would actually attempt to do those things and just charge at it, and I think that would change me for the better.
Well, hey, it does also match your color too. Green.
Oh my god, yeah.
I guess with go back to yourself, I guess. What was the inspiration for the frog profile pic?
Okay, so basically, like, I'm not gonna lie, I'm what we call a furry, so a person that identifies themselves as an anthropomorphic animal.
Hmm.
And essentially, about a year and a half ago, I was dealing with a lot of personal issues, and I felt like I needed to step away from what I was doing and find new communities to hang around in and
Yeah.
basically escape of what I was living through. And that's where I found the furry communities. And basically, a friend of mine um, defended me from something, and I joined their community, and they
Mhm.
were furry. So I was like, okay, I'll see how this goes. And that was like a revelation for me, because it just made me want to be part of those communities.
Yeah.
And this is where another friend drew me as a frog to a bit of fit the other people, and I just kept on getting art of the character, and it became part of me.
Well, I can certainly tell you right now that I'm convinced that you already have the Triforce of Courage with what you've been through. You've certainly had the courage to just, like enter like new territory and expand your whole identity there.
Thank you.
Um, and even just coming on to here to speak about it, that's already courageous enough. And
Really?
I,
Okay.
And that's I have to commend you on that.
Thank you.
Certainly have convinced me that you've got the Triforce of Courage.
Maybe not the Triforce, maybe like a Dorito of courage, but
Maybe
just like a really spicy Dorito, yeah.
really spicy Dorito.
All I have to say is thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you.
You've been
Thank you for having
much
me.
smoother than other guests we've had, I will say. Like,
Oh?
I don't think, honestly, right now, I would never believe you would need the Triforce of Courage, but
No,
I guess.
you're already courageous enough, I think.
yeah.
Okay, well I'll get the power then, so I can smash your butts whenever I need it.
Melon, if you have anything you'd like to shout out, you can go ahead now.
I guess you can follow me on Twitter. I post the mods I do on Twitter, and I sometimes stream on Twitch, but that's like rare, but mostly Twitter.
Yeah, well, I'll have all that in the show description if anybody
Thank
wants to check that out. Thank you for joining us and discussing with Melon the world of game modding. Check out our other Zelda Month content all month long on our YouTube channel. We'd love it if you could follow us on Twitter and listen to future episodes on Spotify and iTunes. Join our community Discord server to continue today's discussion. And we'll see you next time on the Switch Clicks podcast.